Okay, Torah Tuesday. Let's go. Genesis 43 and 44. So 43 starts where 42 started. The family again has run out of food, just like they did at the beginning of last chapter. So they have to go down to Egypt to get more. The only problem is they can't go down to Egypt because Jacob refuses to let Benjamin go down there, which was exactly what Joseph said had to happen if they were going to get more food. I remember Simeon is in Egypt waiting for them to return. He's been held captive there by Joseph. Now, Jacob's hesitation is that last time he let his favorite child go away with his brothers, his favorite child never came back. And that was 20 something years ago. And Jacob is fearful that the same thing will happen again. I think Jacob probably suspects that his brothers weren't exactly innocent in the disappearance of Joseph at this point. So they've run out of food, and this debate kicks off again. Jacob says, go and get more food. The brothers say, we can't go back there without our youngest brother. And Jacob says, well, you can't have him. Then we can't go, they say. Well, then Jacob kicks up a fuss and says, well, why did you even tell this man that you have a younger brother? And the brothers respond by saying, how are we meant to know that he would want to meet our younger brother? Like, that seems so bizarre that is what happened. But then Judah, he steps forward and he says, look, if we don't go down there, then Jacob, you will die from this famine. And so will your favorite son, Benjamin, and so will all of our grandchildren. So Judah tries to speak some sense to Jacob, and Jacob responds by conceding. He says, if it must be, then it must be. But in typical Jacob fashion, he wants to take matters into his own hands, and so he says, go down there with some bribery and some leverage. Pick some of the best products of the land. Take this man a little balm, a little honey, some spices, some myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds, and take double the amount of silver with you. This is just like when Jacob was meeting Esau again for the first time. And so the brothers go to Egypt again. Now, something we have to discuss is what is the deal with these trips up and back and the keeping of one brother behind and the silver being left in the bags and the grains and all of this sort of stuff. I think this can be very confusing as we read through the story. We kind of get lost. Where are we? What's happening? But the thing that you need to notice is that this is actually a really important part of the story. Last week we read that Joseph took one brother, Simeon, and kept him in Egypt, while he sent the other brothers back to Canaan with all of the grain that they came for, as well as the silver they had brought to buy the grain. So he actually sent them back better off than how they had come. Why did he do that? Well, I think what's happening here is that Joseph is running a test on his brothers. He wants to recreate the circumstances of his own enslavement 20 years ago to see if the brothers would treat Simeon in the same way that they treated him. Joseph wants to see if the brothers will return for Simeon at all, or if they would just forget about him and move on with their lives back in Canaan, like they had done with Joseph. See, this is a test that Joseph is running. And actually, we see this happening again. Joseph runs another test on them when they come back to Egypt, this time with Benjamin. Joseph throws a feast for them, and he makes sure at this feast that Benjamin is served 5 times more than anyone else. Why does he do that? Joseph wants to see how the brothers are going to respond to this favoritism. Because remember, favoritism is why they hated Joseph. So how will the brothers respond to this favoritism? So Joseph, I think he's got some trust issues. Remember that he tried to leave all of this stuff in the past. He actually named his son Manasseh, which means repressed or forgotten, but he cannot leave this stuff in the past. He is just circling over the same lack of trust in this relationship again and again and again. And because chapter 44, we have actually Joseph running another test. The brothers are headed home, and Joseph says to his servant, fill their sacks with grain, put the silver back in the sacks, and then he says, put my silver cup in Benjamin's sack, and don't tell anyone what you have done. And so the servant does exactly this, and the brothers leave the next morning, and they are thinking that they have succeeded in their journey. They've left with the grain, they've left with their brother Simeon, who they came to get, and they have not lost Benjamin in the process. And they also got a free meal in an Egyptian palace. It's all hunky-dory for the brothers. But not so fast. Joseph's servants catch up with them and say to them, "Why have you repaid good with evil by taking my master's cup?" But the brothers, they're adamant, "We haven't stole anything." And so they agree, whoever is found to have this cup will become a slave to Joseph, and the rest of the brothers will go free. And so they lower their sacks, and the servants search through the sacks, and behold, Benjamin's bag has the cup. And they are all shocked. And so they return to Egypt with Benjamin to speak to Joseph. Now remember, Joseph was testing them. He wanted to see if they would ditch Benjamin and just head home with the silver and the grain and treat Benjamin the way that they had treated Joseph all those years ago. But the brothers have passed the test. They didn't ditch Benjamin. They have returned to Egypt with Benjamin to speak on his behalf. And so Judah gets up and he speaks to Joseph. And this speech of Judah's is like the high point of the story. He admits to the guilt in verse 16. Now the question is, what is he admitting to? He knows that they didn't steal anything. Joseph knows that they didn't steal anything. We know that they didn't steal anything. So he's not admitting to the guilt of that. I think what he is admitting to is the guilt of mistreating Joseph all of those years ago. And that his speech continues to demonstrate that he has genuinely changed since that episode all those years ago. This is the kind of amazing part of the story. If you read Joseph's speech, it's long, it might seem a bit boring and a bit repetitive, but this is crucial when you dig out the details. Now, firstly, Judah begins by recognizing his father's favoritism of Benjamin. He recognizes that Benjamin's the favorite, but the crucial factor is that Jacob's favoritism was why the brothers hated Joseph all those years ago, but actually Jacob's favoritism here is the grounds for mercy on Benjamin in this story. So what has changed? The brothers have changed. Judah has come to terms with his father's favoritism. And then Judah says the most amazing thing in verse 33. "Now then, please let your servant remain here," he's talking about himself, "as Joseph's slave in place of the young boy, and let the young boy return with his brothers to his father." He says that he, Judah, will take the place of his younger brother as a slave in Egypt in order that his younger brother can go home. Now remember, the plot tension driving this whole section of the story forward is, are the brothers the same now that they were 20 years ago? And the explosive answer from Judah in this speech is not even close. In the way that they betrayed Joseph into slavery, now Judah is willing to say, "I will put myself into slavery in order to save this young man." He does the most incredible thing. Out of love for his father and love for his younger brother, he offers himself as a slave. Now, the gospel connections, I think, are pretty clear. I'll say that last line again. Out of love for his father and love for his younger brother, he offers himself as a slave. Judah, the one from whom the line of the Messiah would come, Judah offers himself as a servant to save another. And this is exactly the language of Philippians 2. Jesus humbled himself, taking on the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Out of love for his father and love for us, his youngest brother and sisters, he offers himself as a slave. And by doing that, he has brought about the catalyst that makes reconciliation possible, just like Judah in this story. Now we'll hear more about that reconciliation next week, but How amazing is Judah's speech. Enjoy the day.